memory.
I understand.
Welcome to episode 2 of the Jibber Jabber Jambalaya. I have Omar. Now, I don't actually know how to pronounce your last name. Is it Wiley or Willie?
Willie.
Willie. Okay. Okay. I had heard that from Jason. I was listening to Both Sides of the Surface on my bike ride, and he
Oh
said that, and I was like, wait, that's not how I say it. Is that right? So I was like, I better ask. So,
yeah.
all right, there we go. I figured it was probably right.
Yeah.
So
Jason's always right.
yeah, fair enough. Uh, so how are you, man? You got a lot of shit going
Yeah. I. Yeah.
on.
I'm hanging in there. I just sent Cynthia down to Portland for yet another doctor, so we can actually manage to keep her eyesight. So that'll be good.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Seeing is good.
yeah.
Alternatively, she could be the next Daredevil. So I mean,
I
that,
thought about that, but
yeah,
radiation is the problem.
yeah.
You
Um, well, thank you for being here. Like you had said, hey, not before March 20th, and we're here recording on the 22nd. So,
Yeah.
uh,
I'm back in the states.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, you were talking about doing stuff with Taiwan. Were you in Taiwan or just having to do stuff overnight
Oh, I was in Japan. Yeah.
in Japan?
Yeah. Had to attend a fan meeting and do an interview with DJ Ace and his new project, which is my old friends, as it turns out. So it was an interesting day and a half, and since I don't sleep and I'm automatically on graveyard shift anyway, I haven't managed the jet lag. So it's
Ah,
all
ah,
I'm
yeah.
just feeling love. So it's all good.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So, whereabouts in Japan were you?
Oh, I was in Tokyo.
In
I was
Tokyo.
in
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was in Shinjuku, the fabulous area.
Yeah. I've never been to Japan. G's and Pot C, who you're probably familiar with their existence at the very least.
Oh yeah,
They're way down in Kagoshima. So, I,
oh,
I
right,
so
yeah,
I think it's like 12 hours by train, if I remember correctly.
yeah,
If you're like on the fast train.
yeah.
Um,
Well, you can't take the fast train all the way to Kagoshima, I think, right now because they had a line diversion, so you actually have to catch a local
okay.
now.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember what when I looked at it before is like, yeah, I don't know if that's gonna happen. We Friends of CC Music has talked I about doing some events, some global events, and we really haven't. Uh, I basically decided that trying to do that stuff, though long term, I think a valuable thing to do, is kind of a waste of time right now. So, I mean, I hope somebody takes some of those thoughts and does something with them. But I decided I was gonna focus on North America because just like
Mhm.
feel like that's. I mean, North America is still huge, but it's a slice of the pie that like we might actually be able to do something with. Um, I don't really know what that means for this show. I haven't really decided that. I mean, so far, both of my guests have been we're 2 for 2 on North Americans, but I don't know how long that'll last. So, um, but yeah. So you said in the email that you had a lot of thoughts about different things. So,
I got lots of thoughts
yeah.
about all sorts of things.
Yeah.
That's what
Well,
I do.
uh, now's the time to share them. So you wanna
Well,
you wanna start with AI? You wanna talk about AI?
AI. Oh yes. Well, I'm gonna try to be polite about AI today.
Fair enough.
It's a challenge because the way that AI has inserted itself into our society has been typical of all capitalist tools, really, where it just sort of basically pisses off everybody who feels like their labor has been exploited. And you have a bunch of bros who have zero freaking art skill whatsoever. Suddenly now they're art experts, right? So that's the aggravation that you run across with most of the generative AI on the art side, like the DALL-E stuff and so on. Oh, and now Claude's got a fancy new thing going on, so I haven't turned that on yet. I'll have to go and explore that later. But the short version of me and AI is, um, like any tool, it depends on whose hands it. As it turns out, my thesis was actually on computational linguistics way back in the 90s, so this is an area that I'm incredibly familiar with,
Yeah.
working with language corpuses and so on, because linguistics was my minor. But the piebald flat version of AI is, it's the language version of a photograph to me. And you're running across the exact same arguments that you ran across with photography when it debuted in the 1830s, right? Like, oh, is it an art, or is it just recording, or is it science, or whatever? And so you've got people like Baudelaire talking about how it will kill off everything. And then you have people who are a little more optimistic, which is, well, maybe we can be creative with this and see what
Yeah,
we get.
you went back to photography, but
Hmm.
my what I always sort of like thought when everybody's like very angsty about AI stuff is like, didn't people like say the same thing about sampling like 40 years ago? I mean, so
Yeah, and of course, well, the problem with sampling was controlled by poor people like us, and immediately, within 10 years, of course, they put the boot on that one pretty quick, with or Bismarcky and Warner Brothers. But yeah, the problem with AI from this point of view is that it's sort of become a top down thing rather than a bottom up thing. And I'm a firm believer that nothing good comes from the top except when you cut off their heads.
fair enough.
And so that tends to be the way I view that, because really right now it's a power tool,
Yeah,
right?
but I mean, we have Hugging Face, and
Yep.
I I think a lot of the sort of technical I don't know, grandiosity, all the claims around DeepSeek are maybe
Boy.
not 100%.
Yeah.
Maybe not false, but misleading. Some of the way that the training stuff is, and I think they were talking about like 5 million, which doesn't
Yep.
seem like a small number anyway. But
Oh,
I mean, I guess if it's easy to use, it's easy to use. But
mhm.
um, I mean, I don't know. I haven't. I mean, I wrote about a little bit about Hugging Face a couple of years ago. I guess a year and a half ago, I think it was. I have to check the date on the blog post. But it's not something that like comes up very often in my work. Like we kind of keep an eye on it because we do a lot with like data, but
Right.
most of what we do is like at least a couple of layers removed from like the actual like training and model
Hmm.
creation and stuff. So we I think we thought that those things would start coming to us, but they really haven't. So um
Yeah.
but yeah,
The,
I mean, Hugging Face, I know there's stuff out there that people can use. So I guess it doesn't. I feel like it doesn't have to be top down. I mean, maybe.
no, it doesn't. But the problem with the problem with language on that level is you need a really massive corpus of
Yeah.
data, right? And what individual has a massive corpus of data? And the answer is none of us.
Well,
Nobody. That. So what we need
yeah.
is we need more of a kind of federation of data that actually builds this base, and that is easier when you have the institutional side of things that's already wired in.
Yeah.
That's why this stuff is coming that direction. It's not necessary that it's that way. It's just that it's difficult to
But
build from the bottom.
but we do have things like archive.org and Wikipedia. I mean,
Yeah.
I
if we don't sue them out of existence, right?
sure. Um, but yeah, download your copies today. Don't delay.
Yeah.
Uh, but I mean, I think probably there's a lot. I mean, yeah, the large language models they have gotten a lot of the hype.
Yeah.
But I think there's value too in just like training on, local data,
Hmm.
like for you know whatever use case that you might want to automate. I mean, that's ultimately what we're talking about, is we're talking about automation, and like people have been writing scripts to do little tasks for, you know, ever since PCs started hitting on people's desks, like
Yeah.
um so I mean there are definitely like new issues as far as like, well, I, the deep fake thing is like,
Mm,
I don't think it's like a new level. Like there's always been like scams, and like it's just like, and it's progression. It's the progress of the scam.
right. Exactly.
But I don't know. Um, yeah, people, it's bad, but there've always been bad things.
Exactly. And photography has been exactly that
Yeah,
bad,
yeah,
which is why I kind of draw those
right,
connections.
yeah,
I have a whole monogram on Soviet era photography and the erasure of historical figures and
yeah,
also artistic figures. This is not new, right? We've been doing this kind of stuff for a long time. There are books on photo fakery that go way, way back, and this is well before Photoshop, right? These are people who were actually hacking at the negative
right,
and things like that. So what happens is that it becomes more available to more people more easily. And the optimist in me, of course, says, well, eventually that sort of evens itself out. But the problem is you have to prevent it from doing massive amounts of damage before it can even itself out. And I think that's what everybody's kind of tense about. It seems like it's all happening so fast and there's no way to tell reality from fake and so on and so on. It's like, well, it's kind of always been that way. It's just that now it's in your face and you notice it, right? It's not that people have more power than they ever had. You've given that to them before. It's like the difference is who has it, in a sense. We used to reserve it for a very particular group of people that said, okay, I trust you to have a camera at the White House, right? I trust you to be the reporter here. But the moment that we started talking about citizen journalism, we broke that line. We don't have a specialized group of people who deal with nothing but these things and nothing but politics, people who are not just part of the White House press corps anymore. Well, under Trump, goodness only knows what will happen to that, right? So we may get back there through the wrong entrance, but yeah, nowadays we've got more sort of a general purpose thing because the computer is basically what my professor used to call general purpose box, right? It's not a specialized tool. And because it's not a specialized tool, it tends not to draw people who are terribly specialized to it, except after a fashion. So we have to figure out what we're going to require in our photographs the same way that we're going to have to turn out, come up with some way of how are we going to distinguish what AI does. But again, we haven't done it with photography, so we've had plenty of time to catch up on that. Photoshop's been around for just about 40 years, so yeah, if we've screwed around on it that long, how long are we going to screw around on AI before it becomes serious, right?
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
really simple things. It's just like inserting in your metadata, oh, this was altered by this program, or I used this API to create dot dot dot. It's not complicated stuff. This doesn't make files massively large or anything, right? Right. This stuff is
yeah,
all
yeah.
it's all in the hidden bit. So it's not like we have an awful lot of difficulty making it happen on the technical level. The problem, of course, as always, is the social level. like whether or not we actually think that that's meaningful and whether or not we're willing to stand by that as a principle. These days, talking about principle probably gets you put into an ice chamber, so who knows, right? But I'm optimistic about it because I have to be optimistic about it. I mean, hopeful, not rosy Pollyanna kind of optimism, but
Sure, sure. I I wanted to do the prequel here.
yeah.
Um, so when we were talking over email,
Hmm.
and you mentioned the AI stuff. Um, you also mentioned that things have been horribly dull with Creative Commons since 2023,
Yeah.
and yeah, I wanted to explore that a bit.
Well, um, part of the problem is there's been churn in the corporation itself, right? Um, I was a big fan of Catherine. Um, she was very good for that organization in two ways, particularly. One, she's actually an educator, which was really nice to have. And two, she wasn't from the States. So that was really nice to have. It was actually really nice to have somebody from outside of the traditional bailiwick, right, of CC leading the organization, not just kind of contributing to it. And in a sense, to remind everybody that this isn't just an American thing based on American law. This is something that should be useful and should be important around the world in different traditions. I think she was very good at a certain part of that. And I think some of the conversations we had during lockdown were very good on that, talking about South Asian piracy was an extraordinarily fantastic conversation to have because piracy seems in a lot of ways like it's the enemy of the commons, but it actually is kind of the promoter of the commons in a very peculiar way. It's just that we can't see it that way in the United States because our legal system is very fragile when it comes to things like that. We've got fair use, and we don't have a concept of free use, for instance, which seems as obvious as day if you're anywhere else, but no, that hasn't been written in. And fair use, of course, with its four-pronged traditional test, is very nebulous because there are things that fail all four of those prongs, and yet nevertheless we pass those cases on, like the Sony Beta recorder, right? That fails all four prongs. But it's like, no, it's still in the public interest to have that. Like, yes, you're right. That is in the public interest to have that. But then there are things that pass all four prongs, and we say no.
Yeah,
Also, it's, the legal part of it is very problematic for us to communicate our tradition to other cultures. And when we invite people from other cultures to talk about things, um, unfortunately, they're talking largely to a bunch of lawyers because so much of CC has been led by lawyers and created by lawyers. And it's up to people like me who go, I really don't give a tinker's damn about the law in this case. I want to talk about use cases. I want to talk about people. I want to go to the ground level and answer a very simple question, which is what the hell can Creative Commons do for me at this point with this? And I think they've been very, very poor at answering that question, particularly after Catherine. I think the new CEO, they haven't really had enough time to settle in. But the people who have been carried over, and the conversations that have been carried over from that period have been, oh, well, let's talk about AI, but let's talk about the law of AI, not what we can actually do with it for the commons. Like, well, yeah, that's cute and stuff, but most of us don't care. We simply don't. And that's not because I don't believe in the rule of law. Obviously I do, or I wouldn't be rocking the Creative Commons shirt. The rule of law is very important for lots of things. It's the basis of it, but discussions about why there's a rule of law are extremely abstract.
yeah, yeah.
And artists tend to think very abstractly about their own art, but they tend not to think terribly abstractly about things like that because they're interferences. They
Yeah,
take them away from it.
it's interesting that you're citing 2023 because I kind
Yeah,
of feel like that. I mean, I guess you said there was some interesting things going on during the you know the height of the pandemic, I guess.
yeah,
Um, but I kind of feel like I was just looking to see like when did Eric Stoyer left. I mean, I guess Eric Stoyer didn't leave until 2021, but
yeah.
even before that, I mean, I guess like, so Eric left the board of Cash Music in 2018, and that was the same year I think that the FMA got sold to Kicksplit.
Right.
I kind of feel like, or maybe that was 2017. I feel like 2017, 2018 was kind of, I don't know. I feel like I feel like the date is maybe before before 2023, but uh, yeah,
I think the rot has been present for a while.
yeah,
I'm not gonna lie about that. My opinion about Creative Commons when I went to the summit in 2019 is well documented, right? Um, and I have the same problem with Creative Commons now that I had then, which is it's cool, to hang out with Olivia Cooper Harris and to hang out with all these people who are using the licenses either through Tribe of Noise or on their own. And it's cool to see artists give presentations like that. But if you want to actually talk about percentages, there's no real artistic track to go through any of Creative Commons seminars that I've ever been to over the last 10 years. It's almost like they don't exist or they're not expected to attend. And so you have to ask yourself, well, then what's the goddamn function of the seminar?
yeah,
Right. And there needs to be something where artists, particularly, and users, particularly, who don't necessarily consider them artists, but they do casual remixes on YouTube or whatever, take your pick. Those people need to feel like they're part of this too and that they have some stake,
yeah, yeah.
not pure law.
I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody. Back when Nick and I were doing the Lawcast, the Music Management Lawcast,
Yeah.
we spoke to some folks from Korea, and we never ended up getting the folks from South Africa on, but we emailed back and forth with them a bit, and I feel like we might have had some other regional. Oh, I think Japan. Um, but anyway, um, we had that interaction at the regional level, but I never really any interaction with CCHQ. I don't know. Well, I guess that's not true. I mean, there was Eric. I mean, Eric was always doing other stuff. So, um, but I guess so that's sort of like the disclaimer on what I'm about to say. Um, I wonder if, and maybe you have some insight into this. I wonder if some of the idea with that is there are other organizations that they kind of do that. So, for example, 2014, I think, maybe it's 15. Cheyenne Hoffman, who was at the FMA at the time, and I don't know, I don't remember who else was there, but we were at the Future of Music Coalition Summit, whatever they called themselves, in DC. And I mean, there are other music specific organizations, and um, you know, the folks at Creative Commons know that. Um, I mean, I don't. it wasn't like Creative Commons didn't exist there. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. What's interesting. It's kind of a matter of who Creative Commons HQ thinks their constituents are, I guess.
Well, I think they've decided their constituents are their board and their immediate, their immediate office and occasionally related lawyers. And I think that they tend to punt when it comes to anything else. And it's been that way for a very, very long time. Uh, it's cool to see how many articles there were about Creative Commons circa 2006,
Yeah.
2007, because I've crunched these numbers and it's very depressing. And about 2012, it hits and it plateaus and then it goes down sharply.
Well,
Well,
2014 was an interesting year because
that's
4.0
a
came out, and then they finally got the Art Libre folks to agree with what CCHQ had been saying all along, that the Art Libre license was compatible with CC BY-SA. Um, so I mean, in some sense, I mean, and I haven't. There was, I know, some talk of like um, CC next, something after 4.0, but really, there's some sense, and rightly or wrongly, I guess, that they're done. Like, we have the licenses, um, and um, I mean, maybe they're right. Like, maybe it is the call of other organizations to, like, if you're like, you can't be everything to everyone. Like, that is just not a thing that's possible. I mean, I also understand that, like, it does feel like they're like, rather than like trying to do anything, they're kind of abdicating all responsibility.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't know. Like, maybe other people need to just like they've shown they're not going to do it. So I guess at this point, whether we like it or not, like, we kind of just need to like make stuff happen ourselves, I guess. Like,
Well, every time they have tried to sort of federate responsibility out, right?
yeah,
Every time they've tried to come up with another group of people, hey, here's CCUS, hey, here's
yeah.
CC Japan, here's CC Indonesia, those folks wind up not talking to each other, which I find fascinating. And when we try to do things like, oh, well, they tried to put together CC Science for a while, which lasted until Hal kind of threw in the towel on it. And there are a couple of things that happen where CC starts out saying, hey, you guys can do this, and we'll just go back and we'll concentrate on writing the next set of laws and fixing really dumb crap like why Flickr is still using 2.0 licenses, right?
Yeah, you do see that kind of stuff from time to time. Like, what is the point of that? But
Indeed. Oh, and I wonder what the point of that is. Now I understand that they can't be everything, but at the same time, I think the converse is true, which is that they have to be something.
yeah,
And I don't know that we have a real firm answer for what that is.
yeah.
They keep on training people, but they train people that are almost exclusively in glam. And if you're not in glam, which I happen not to be,
So
then
I don't know what you mean, and I'm sure other people don't know what is glam.
let me explain. Yeah, glam is galleries, libraries, archives, museums.
Okay.
So that's the fancy term that they have for all of those people that are trying to effectively use CC licenses to open up all of their collections digitally
Yeah,
to the world. So Library of Congress, for instance, is on that list. Although technically Library of Congress, almost everything there is public domain,
yeah.
they still work with CC, and you have all of the ones in Europe that benefit from this more because they have a much more how shall we say custodial tradition. Like at the Rijksmuseum or the British Museum, those people have not had a public domain that works the way that the United States does. It's quite a bit different. And so as a user, go looking for something that we knew was digitally existed in the Rijksmuseum, like a Rembrandt paper print or something like that. And then they would ask us for $90 to have a JPEG file of something. It's like, dude, I'm just writing an article about Rembrandt. And this is public domain anyway, isn't it? Well, you can see where that goes. So CC has done pretty well at getting most of those folks on the same page, which is cool. It's really great to be able to go into the Boston Museum and download all of their, ukiyo-e floating world prints, because it's a nice collection and they happen to have the largest one in the country. So that's cool. But not particularly practical for the rest of us. Right. And the energy that they have spent on galleries, libraries, archives, and museums is specialist knowledge. Right. And it's the law for specialists. And that's not what I can't entirely say that that's not what I am. But for the people who, unlike me, are not qualified researchers who actually have a card to get into the Library of Congress and people like that, they're wondering what the stakes are. And the original stakes are, well, now that we've opened it up, why don't you go put this to use? And then Creative Commons like sponsored a remix thing of all the art that was released from these archives. Like, well, that's cool. And then they just they disappear. And that is no longer a thing now, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the role that we're looking for. If the galleries, libraries, archives, museum, glam folk,
Yeah, I was gonna say you can just say glam at this point. Make life easy.
for you. But if those folks have all this material and they're telling all of us to use it, okay, cool.
Yeah.
How do we do this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my so this is I didn't really probably just because I didn't care enough to look into it. But yeah, didn't sort of realize that was their target audience. So I guess,
Yeah.
if that's the case, then like whose fault is it that the music community is not connecting? I mean, like music libraries are a thing. Like,
Yeah.
like is that on us? Is that on them? Like I don't know. Like
I think that's on them. Uh, I think what we need is a certain amount of proselytization, right? And I don't mean that we have to be totally turning CC into a marketing group, because that's not the point. But the point is, if you've opened up all of this, who knows? Who knows what's actually available? Are we just magically going to stumble onto the Rijksmuseum page and find out that they released
yeah,
34,000 works? Like, yeah, well, you could do a little bit better job at that.
I mean, you've mentioned like the Reichs and the Library of Congress, which are names that people know, but like
Right.
it's
That's why.
like there are libraries everywhere, and
Exactly.
like you know, and I like why are they not making stuff happen? Like that's you know, I get that they're like budget issues, but like surely it's not just budget. I mean, we're talking about like you know things that digital assets that are essentially free. Like,
Yeah. I think there's a shared responsibility there, right? I'm in Seattle, and our library folks are really good about this. And they have exhibits and gallery shows and workshops and so on about this topic. So they're pretty simpatico to the whole thing. But I'm in a really big city and a really technologically wired city. So in that sense, that's privilege.
and well,
Everybody knows.
and maybe this is outside the purview, and maybe this is like where people like me and you come into play. But it's like a gallery and stuff is that's all fine and great. I like going to museums and stuff, but like there's a lot of the world that's not a museum too, and like there's Creative Commons out there too. Like
Indeed.
so and I don't really know. I mean, like libraries, they have like bookmobiles some
Mhm.
places. But aside from that, like what are these places doing to like reach out to their communities? I mean, I know in some neighborhoods, there's like the little the like little box library things, take a book, leave a book. But like
Oh
those
yeah.
those exist because like in large part, and there might be exceptions to this, but in large part because the official like public library system is failing those communities. That's why they exist.
Yeah, and I think that I mean we have a massive number of little free libraries
Yeah.
around Seattle too, and I would um, the Seattle King County library system is the second largest in the country. So again, I'm in a particular position of privilege when I talk about things like this. But for us, it serves a different function that I think it also serves to a much greater degree in places that are not Seattle. Namely, um, it allows people to determine what belongs in a library in a sense, and that's not generally a conversation that we have. I mention it to say this, which is if this is library from the ground up, because that's basically what little free libraries are, then you're establishing protocol for using libraries at the same time. This is donated, this is taken, this is given. There is a massive amount of trust involved in this. I happen to be a great fan of trust, and I think that's the other thing that's in the commons in general as an idea that we rely upon. I think that with the rise of AI, the trust function of all of those things is broken. And I think we haven't necessarily addressed how that works. For instance, let's go back to the original IBM large language model survey where they went through all of the Creative Commons stuff to train their machine learning. I'm sitting there in Portugal just after this news has bowed and everybody's like, well, I didn't give them permission to. It's like, well, no, you kind of did, right? You
Yeah.
put a license on it that says, well, go ahead. And at this point, it was all in-house. It was not released to the public anyway. It was just IBM figuring out what the hell they were going to do with this. So there was externally no harm, but people could see what the writing was on the wall,
Yeah.
right? Is our okay now all of a sudden we've got this out here. Now we start need to having workshops about whether or not people can use Creative Commons work to train their machines. And my response is I just don't care. But what they want to do, I think, is fine tune the idea of what's a use, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is sort of related to sampling in a strange way, right? Which is, well, I'm okay as a jazz musician if I decide to quote 5 different songs in my solo because okay, that's what we do. Again, Jason and I had this discussion, right? African American music is about quotation. That's what we do. That's the fundamental basis of all of it, from the blues all the way on. So we don't question when somebody picks up one of our licks and goes, okay, yeah, I recognize that. Okay, he's part of the tradition. Cool, we're gonna bow. He's a real musician. We let him know that. So then what happens when it's quote unquote not a real musician, right? This is the problem that early hip hop artists suffered through. Like, well, they obviously know my music really well, but are they really musicians? Do I really have to allow them to use this? Are they really part of my tradition, right? And there has to be this kind of bizarre purity test. My answer then was the same as it is now, which is, well, obviously they're musicians, silly. They're quoting music, right? And I don't think that the professionalization of music necessarily does us as much good as we think. In a lot of ways, it's a holdover from the bad old days, right? When it was just too freaking expensive to press anything,
Oh yeah.
right? Or it was too expensive to hire an orchestra or take your pick. The scale for individual use was simply not happening, which is why we developed the industries that we did. in the bizarre way that we did. But had the technology been available, would we have developed things that way? And my answer is probably not. We would probably have thought that different things were of value. And I think that to me, you know, one of Larry Lessig's favorite things to quote was the John Philip Sousa court case, right, where he's talking about singing the old songs of the day. Well, that's kind of what music is for. That's its principle, right? We want you singing our songs. We want you humming the old songs of the day. But then suddenly, well, we want you singing the songs of the day, but we don't want you recording them. Like, wait, what? Huh? I'm just here with my friends. Who cares? Okay, well, we want you singing the songs of the day, and it's okay if you record them for personal use, but we don't want you to trade that to anybody who wasn't there in the room at the same time. Like, wait, what? Huh? That's what we do, is we talk to each other about what we do. That's how we spread our love of music. That's why we had walls of mixtapes. It's not because we weren't trying to promote artists. It's because we were, right? We were listening on the radio and go, God, I got to hit play at just the right time to get this song and make sure that the DJ is going to talk over the intro, damn it. This kind of thing, right? And because at least we were allowed at the time to record over the air things to tape, they existed in that sort of musical wonderland. We put together mixtapes off the radio, and then we started to put together mixtapes off of people's albums. And as I stand here before you today, or as I sit, I can tell you that probably 3/4 of my musical interest comes from other people's mixtapes and artists I heard from other people. It sure as hell didn't come from the radio. Certainly not AM radio in the 1970s or 80s. Are you joking? So if they hadn't allowed those mixtapes, or if they had clamped down on them earlier, more accurately, would that have helped the artists? And I think not. I think not. And I think that's the argument that we're giving right now for AI usage, right? Well, if AI uses my stuff, then nobody benefits from it. It's like, really? You think that's the case? I'm not so sure that that's not the case. Well, then somebody else who isn't a trained artist might be able to imitate my style. Like, okay, and then what? Right? Who cares? And to tell you that I'm saying this in good faith. My Seattle writers group, when I led it, we had something that we call the orphanage. And in the orphanage was all of our sketches that went nowhere, or lines that we really liked but we couldn't freaking finish, or poems that were just orphans, right? That we couldn't solve. And we'd put them all in the orphanage, and we'd let all the rest of the people who were poets pull anything out they wanted, completely remix it, completely change it, and put our name at the end. Only thing we ever asked for, right? Just acknowledge that somebody inspired you. That's cool. It's cool when somebody inspires you, because it makes history seem personal instead of this abstract garbage that we teach in theoretical classes. So I've had an awful lot of poems that I have written off of other people's lines, and I've donated about 10 notebooks worth of lines that I couldn't possibly have done anything with. So it's not like I'm saying this out of bad faith. I'm saying this in good faith. And I have heard the argument, which is like, well, how do you stop somebody from stealing your ideas? Like, let them steal it. Good luck, because I guarantee you that they're not going to come up with a thing that I would have. It's not stolen, it's translated in a very peculiar way. The same way that when I take my photography students out and I make them, I have a 5-foot hula hoop that I toss, right? And I toss it out into the quad, or I toss it out into the public park, and everybody has to stand inside of it, and that's the only place they can make pictures. Well, the location's the same, the tool's the same, everything in front of them is the same, and yet none of them look the same. None of them take the same photograph, not even close. The material is not the art. The art is the process, right? The art is looking at something going, yeah, I think that this will make me think about something else. And that's what the people like Gadamer and all the hermeneutics folks are talking about when they get all fancy talking about art. It's not that art in and of itself is the important thing. It's the way that it generates conversation. It's the way that we talk about art that's important. Kylie Minogue isn't important because she sells 50,000 copies in Seattle. Kylie Minogue isn't important because she goes platinum in Britain. Kylie Minogue is popular because people talk about it to other people. That's why it sells 500,000 copies, right? In the bad old days when I worked at Tower Records, I was there at the time when they finally transferred the way that we recorded numbers and sales to the actual cash register rather than it coming from the distributor's list. And lo and behold, what came through was, well, people listen to an awful lot of hip hop and heavy metal. That was on the charts. And now it is, right? You remember this circa 1992, 1993, especially. Like, yeah, no kidding. Because I watched people buy this stuff and it was never, ever on the big charts because they were busy reporting what the distributors had sold to the warehouse. Well, who cares what's in the warehouse? I care what's in people's hands. That's where the conversation starts. It's the conversation between the clerk and the person buying an album. That's part of the art too. That's the thing that makes that valuable. And the clerk, knowing that that's a thing that he's going to like, can recommend 1,000 other things because of this purchase. That's what art's for. Art's to promote other art. Art's to make it possible for artists to come up with other things and to say, yeah, I like that idea. I need more conversation about it. Okay, here's something else to talk about. Here's something else that I'm thinking about. That's what we do. And when we make that easier for people, none of us loses. I think artists are a little more proprietary because they're so used to being fisted by big companies who have more power than them, right? They're used to signing away all of their rights in order to get a 7% advance or some crap like this. And so, yeah, of course, they're a little more jealous when they see somebody making money. Well, like, I mean, it looks like they're making money off you, but actually they're kind of getting screwed by the same people you are, and we're all really kind of in the same boat. And this is really unpopular to say in the days of anti-empathy, courtesy of our morons in chief. But I don't care if somebody's more successful than I am. If I made it possible, good on me. And good on them for being successful. Good on them for taking my idea and doing something with it. Good idea on them for saying, "Oh yeah, I remember I had this teacher once upon a time, and he told me that this was the greatest thing in the world, and I'm way better now than he is." Good for you. Knock yourself out. I don't want discussions about machinery to shut human beings down from doing the thing that we're supposed to be doing. And we're having talks about machines instead of talks about people, and that's the wrong locus of conversation.
So, as you know, um, this is episode 2. So we haven't. I think the idea is that there never will be a plan. I think that's kind of what people wanted
Good.
when this was yeah. So I don't know. We talked a little bit about the Constitutional Convention. One of the things that came out. Well, let me ask you. Did you go
I did.
back and watch any of those recordings? I know you said you got the time zones all wrong and stuff. So,
Yeah.
but I did these like pilot shows, and
Mhm.
they were kind of like people were kind of like, why don't you just keep doing that? So I don't know how much music is going to be a part of like actually listening to music. I think sometimes that might be a thing. Um, there's an artist that always makes me laugh. And I didn't know this until I just looked it up, but he actually released an album today.
Oh,
I was thinking we could take a break. I know you need to eat, and maybe you could shove a couple bites in your mouth, and we could take a little listen to this. What do you think?
I'm all about music.
Okay.
So
So I'm not sure how this is gonna work. Actually, it's not YouTube, so this might actually work. It's on Bandcamp.
oh,
So
good.
YouTube, when we play videos, they've got some weird spam prevention thing now. I don't even know if it works at all. It used to work great, but I'm gonna try to share this. I don't know how well that the audio quality is gonna come through. Can you see the Bandcamp page?
Not yet.
Okay. Sharing this tab. So it may just be sharing the audio. Um, I'm gonna press play and then you can tell me if you can hear it, okay?
Okay. Clear.
What was that?
I hear it loud and clear,
Okay. So
but no
people
visual.
people on the video will be able to see. I'll drop the link in here. So you can. It's cool enough, I guess. But uh, yeah, I guess because I did share video instead of share. So I dropped the YouTube in there. So if you want to watch like
Yes.
the actual stream, you could do that. But I also just dropped the Bandcamp in
I
there.
saw I
And,
saw both.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so I don't know how many of these tracks that we'll get through, but yeah, we'll. One of the things that I love about Columbo Black in his various incarnations, he sometimes I click through here. Sometimes his stage name is Rogue Gallery. Sometimes it's Columbo Black. He also started releasing, I think his producer Fabian Bonaparte has released some stuff. So again, and the Black Ellington is a new one. Again, on the stream, people will be able to see the album artwork for those, but you're unfortunately not able to see those. But you've got the link, so you can poke around while we listen. But um, one of the things that I love is that some people probably hate this because it feels kind of like TikTok-y. But I don't think he's trying to hit like he has some tracks that are like 2 minutes and 37 seconds. One on here is 3 minutes and 19 seconds. He just writes a song until he's done with it. And it doesn't matter if that song is 49 seconds or 3 minutes and 30 seconds. That's the song. And I just love that. And he always releases like 20 tracks. And it's like, he didn't spend like hours in the studio making this like the perfect radio cut. He said what he wanted to say and he moved on. And I just love that.
Yeah.
I love the idea, but I also love the work. Anyway, so this was released today. Album Prolific by the stage name Columbo Black. And the first track here, which I'm going to start it back over, Rings of Saturnalia.
Listen. One of the very few that Shakespeare quoted, the brain quicker. Poster child for niggas that grew up in Compton and is not a gang member. If I ruled the world, my album would come installed on your iPhone. And if you tried to delete it, your iPhone would probably die slow. I know a couple of techniques that would leave your mind blown. My poems belong on the rings of Saturn. I'm in flight mode. Life gets injected onto a blank canvas. It's beautiful to behold. If you never wrote a rhyme, you wouldn't know. My apologies. I've never had a child, but I imagine that it's something close. From nothing, one constructs a quote. Marvelous. Now I know how pyramid builders felt when they finally got to place the last stone. That's a legacy cemented. It'll last long. Yeah, secluded in a laboratory, the mad scientist works on his next creation. Nothing about his ethos is even next to basic. Respect my forearm hair, I don't dog. In a pen in motion, I might snatch the soul of your role model. Professional pelvic thruster on a black Harley, my helmet must be. Hired help from notable men, I got Elvis buffs. Green beans, green Hummer Cruise, we not do good. We mastered the game and left some cliff notes for the sleuth foot. See, you too can purchase shots for cash you just happen to have. Damn, $1 million for this Civil War rifle, a blast from the past. Yeah, my chef is Filipino and German, he makes a better lamb. This season is Take Me Away, I'm in Neverland. Yeah, the fountain in my driveway boy can be seen from the next city. I used to want to be the next Diddy, that didn't age well. I'm in a range out on Pico, about to raise hell. Blackjack table out in Reno, it pays swell. You stay surrounded by squares, you a chess piece. I'm on some just piece, just feeling the best breeze. Fondle a woman that wants me, thinks I'm a bestie. She better move on to the next step. Helicopters landing in undisclosed locations. He broken, have a lack of motivation. When he doing no less than 20 deep when I'm rolling in public. You was dolo when you rolled in the function, man. Where they doing that? Out here androgynous, talking violent in your songs. Not convincing why they put you on. Save every penny, every coin counts for surely. You days wanna kiss me, all the stones and the rolling, jumping off the Maserati, my chains are never hollow. That's right. Toast a long life, tap the cork on the bottle. Tap the cork on the bottle. Tap the cork on the bottle. Live life. Yes. $500,000, pull a wad out the safe. On my jet ski, I'll pull a card out my lake. Softball thick, never like my chick skinny. Man, all y'all simps, y'all had spent too much Skrilly. What you know about this Hublot? That's a watch. If you didn't know, now you do. It's a given, I am special. Coke white car, if I drove through, it'll look like I gentrified your ghetto. Beef empanadas at the Mexican spot, plus the taco. Mix Bacardi with the horchata, they hit Yo Bravo. I am him. I should be followed by niggas playing the violin, yo. Save every penny, every coin count for sure. That's for sure. Wanna kiss me, all the stones and the rolling, jumping out the Maserati, my chains are never hollow. Toast a long life, tap the cork on the bottle. Tap the cork on the bottle. Tap the cork on the bottle. Just live life. Road gallery. Still claiming the set, that's nasty work. It's all for validation from other niggas, that's massive thirst. Your criminal endeavors will lead to rape inside the prison system. Yet you speak of it on wax like it's really splendid. I don't want to hear what it takes for me to be a man from a sucker, a follower. You dudes be nut swallowing. Niggas eating off the same template, rapping about traps they never been in. And even if they was, why they snitching? I thought the code would stay solid, my bad. Now they doing podcasts. The streets done breeding some chatty patties. Integrity is gone when they see that the cash is faster. I can't call it.
All right. So after the Rings of Saturnalia, we heard Cork on the Bottle and the Chatting Nature of Patties. There were a couple lines in there that made me laugh. You are muted, sir.
On purpose.
Oh, yeah. It looked like maybe you were trying to say something, but.
Oh no! I didn't want you hearing me chew.
Oh yeah. No, I was muted on purpose for a little while as well, and then at the very end there, it looked like maybe you were saying something. So.
Oh no, I'm good.
Okay. Yeah.
Set now.
Yeah.
I love that stuff. I think that's like the hip hop version of punk, right? Where you just kind of get in, like, this is the idea. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah. No, that's fair. The thing that that's just hilarious to me, like, I don't know how much of this you were able to pick up on in just those 3 tracks, but he's clearly like deeply steeped in hip hop culture, but he's also parroting hip hop culture.
Oh yeah, totally.
Like he's all the time talking about like helicopters and furs and and it's just so over the top. Like one of the, I don't remember which album it was on, but he had a line that stuck with me that said, uh, "Even my dog's maid has a maid." I was just like, that's quality. So
Yeah, that's old school, right? That's the kind of Keith Cowboy stuff, right? Where we just, I don't want to mention any, and he's really quoting Elmer Fudd, but of course it's also a parody of, of the whole hip hop scene, right? Like, yeah, I love that stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, reminds me. I remember they interviewed Rusty Cundieff about Fear of a Black Cat, and he said, "Well, I got the idea for the movie when I realized that all these white folks actually thought we were serious when we were talking." Yeah, and I love that stuff. And the more you know about hip hop and the way it uses signifiers, the more enjoyable that stuff becomes.
Uh, so
Yeah,
I would like to. We've been talking big picture and about Creative Commons HQ and some of the direct relationships there, and also about technology, AI specifically. I'd like to spend some time thinking about um, what we can do, both maybe with Netlabel Day specifically, but with um, Friends of CC Music, maybe more broadly. Um, both maybe some practical things and also maybe some dreams.
mm. Well, let's start with the dream.
Fair enough. Hey, I mean, honestly, if you don't know where you're going, then how are you going to
Yeah,
get there? So,
exactly. Well, you get there very slowly.
right, or not at all. You get somewhere, but
I often think about why I got involved in Creative Commons in the first place. And part of it was I'm a real firm believer in the rule of law. And that sounds very strange because everybody knows that I'm an anarchist. It's like, yeah, well, part of being an anarchist is actually respecting the decorum, right? Because if we're not all on the same page, then this just turns into the biggest cluster ever. And when you live with people like I did in a group, in a, sort of my anarchist commune with 12 other people, right? Everybody knows what everybody else is doing, and when everybody else is doing it, that's the law. It's not coming down from above. It's the law. It's the thing that we agreed on that binds us. And this is the set of tasks, and this is who's in the kitchen, and this is what they're going to be doing, so that there's actually as much freedom for everybody else to work around that as possible. And everybody gets their moment, everybody gets their time, everybody gets their responsibility. And I think that's kind of my ideal way of working through life in general, even to this day. Um, yeah, it would have been nice if we'd have had a slightly larger house with somewhat newer plumbing, but at the same time, you got what you got. And I've got right now the United States of America, so it's always a fixer upper. It's always a project. And in my sort of anarcho syndicalist spirit, the idea is to get everybody else on the same page about how we do things. So the premise of me using Creative Commons to say, hey, look, we can do better than Harper and Row, right? We can do better than having only 3 distributors and 3 publishers that are responsible for 80% of the damn books on the market. I think that time has passed. I think that I was a little bit sad to see capital EMI bought up, but then I thought to myself, well, actually, I kind of hate capital EMI, so it doesn't really matter. And I don't really care if they all condense into one little singularity of publishing entertainment, right? Knock yourself out, because the fewer heads you have, the easier it is to cut them off and make them roll, and leave the rest of the world for the rest of us. And so the goal is always kind of been the same in my life. When I started a literary magazine, the idea was to get everybody's stuff out of their closet, you know, to get all of the work that you have out from under your bed and out of your drawers and onto a page. And it's the same with music. It's like, well, I don't care if you're a quote unquote professional musician. I want your music out there. I want it heard. I want people talking about it. I want you to feel like you're contributing. And I want people to notice the quality of your work even when you don't. And that's extremely important to me. The reason that I have Netlabel Day continues that trend, which is okay, we've got all these people who call themselves net labels. And again, I'm very loose on the term because terminology isn't where my concern is. I'm concerned with getting people's music into other people's ears and presumably through their ears to their hearts and their heads. That's the thing that matters to me. I've kind of inherited a brand name, if you want to look at it that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And then the goal of that brand name is to say, well, whatever pull I have, and trust me, it isn't very much, but whatever pull I have to use this for the greater good. And the greater good is getting more people noticed and getting more music heard and convincing other people that this isn't all hopeless. That there is not just a you have to sign with a major label in order to be considered a professional musician kind of nonsense, because that's categorical BS.
Yeah. I mean, okay. I mean,
Right.
do people actually think that?
There are plenty of
Okay.
people who think that still, and I don't know how or why, but there they
I
are.
mean, like, both of my parents were professional musicians, and neither of them were on major record labels. I mean,
Yep.
and I think, there are degrees of professionalism too. I mean, there's the touring musician that also, does whatever. Maybe they do summer camps or something. Like there's seasonal work and things like that. But my parents were both like salaried professional musicians. Like,
Yeah.
no,
Well, there's different ways of going about it, and I think it it's sort of stuck in my craw when I saw somebody online talking shit about Carol Kay. And I'm like, dude, if you were actually in front of me, I would probably pull your pants down and then smack you in the gob just because, right? Talking smack about one of the leading bass players in the history of music. But who's going to know her name? Well, people who care know her name. She's on more recordings than any other musician. There's a reason for that. She's made more than enough money. It's not that it's not that she needed her name to do it. It's that everybody called the person who had her before, right? The name gets
yeah,
passed.
yeah,
So would I rather live a life like Carol Kay, or would I rather do a one-hit wonder thing and disappear into the ether like Tony Borello or Nervous Norvis or something like that from the
yeah,
40s or 50s? Well, I'd rather be Carol, but both of those are options, right?
yeah,
Okay, if you've only got one song, you should have that opportunity to get that one song out. It's okay if you want to be a quote unquote studio musician, whatever the hell that phrase means anymore, right? That's perfectly fine. It's okay if you just want to be a gig specialist and play people's weddings and events, because God knows I've done that too. All of those are fine. But if you decide that you want other people to hear your music, there should be as few barriers as possible to that. And I think that way about any art. There should be as few barriers as possible to having people read your short story or your chapbook or your monograph, whatever it is. We've made that a little more possible on the academic level because academic presses exist to do that. But of course, academic presses, they really need to be taught the Creative Commons, if anybody, right? If I could turn Creative Commons headquarters energy away from galleries, libraries, archives, and musicians to the academic press, oh my goodness. Like, wait, you're salaried, writing this for free on an academic press that is edited by people who are also salaried and they're getting paid twice to do this, and you still want to put this behind a JSTOR barrier and make me pay $70 for a 500-word article, you could probably have my middle finger, right? So how does that serve the person who wrote that piece? They were just trying to get an idea out. How does that serve the person who actually really needs that idea at that particular time? They have no access unless they belong to one of the special colleges that have a subscription to that crap, or they're willing to sacrifice their middle class disposable income to it, right? Assuming, of course, that they have disposable income. So the thing behind Creative Commons and behind Netlabel Day that I've always preserved is that I don't care what license is on things particularly, as long as it's a shareable license. I don't care if you have another version of it to sell, because hey, sell your stuff, make some money if that's what you think you can do. Knock yourself out. I don't care if it's commercial or not. Doesn't matter. I only care if it's freely shareable and people have some kind of access to it, at the very least, on Netlabel Day itself.
Yeah. While we're on the topic,
Yeah.
I think that is the word, is shareable.
Yep.
We spent some time trying to figure out what to call things, because a lot of people, again, we were talking about you inherited a brand. I think a lot of people are their brand CC. Um, and it is, I think, the strongest brand of the shareable licenses. I don't
Mm-hmm.
really think there's any sort of legitimate argument. I mean, at least in the music space. I mean, there's open source software licenses as well, but there are other licenses, and I mean, other than the fact that it's new, I don't understand what the problem with shareable is. I mean, what maybe there's something that jumps out at you, that seems like that. I mean, you're using it, so I guess not. But it doesn't seem
Yeah.
problematic to me. But maybe I'm missing something.
No, I don't think you're missing anything. I think part of the problem is socially we've really gotten away from sharing things. Um, More accurately, we've gotten away from sharing things with propriety. I'll put it that way for a second, right? I was going to say properly, but that's not exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
People think nothing of taking a screenshot of copyrighted material and sending it on to somebody else.
Yeah.
That is shareable, which is to say they can do it technically, but that's not legally the case, right? And again, because I'm a big fan of the rule of law, I think that it should be legally shareable. Why? Because I really love copyright? No, that's the no. That's the exact opposite of reality. The reality is you put a license that says this is shareable on it to me. It tells me that you actually value the rule of law. It tells me not just that you're not concerned about legal stuff or any of that kind of garbage, but it tells me that you want your work to be in a sort of sharing
Yeah.
economy.
Yeah.
Right?
Nick and I, again, back when we were doing the Lawcast, I don't know, I think we did talk about this on the show, but definitely outside of the show, we were talking about what license to pick. And
Right.
we ended up going with the unported because, you know, it was about communicating that this is for everybody. Like
Yep.
if we picked like a CC USA license, then people are going to be like, can I use this in
Mm-hmm.
Uzbekistan? You know, it's confusing.
Yeah.
And so I think that is important. And I guess that is sort of why the you know, and I don't know how to fix this long term, But
Mm,
I do think that that's kind of why the Net Label Day and the Net Label Week, the brand is is a little misleading.
in,
Um, and as you said, it was inherited. Um, I mean, I think though that maybe there's an opportunity
mm,
within that, sort of. I mean, there's two sides of this. You have to ask, what is a net label? Well,
right.
the one thing is like, yeah, it'd be nice if it was just obvious what we were trying to accomplish. But the other thing is that like, if you have something provocative and something that people are actually like asking a question about,
Mm,
then that's an opportunity. This is to say like this is where net labels come from. This is why that is the word that was used. That's why that was picked. Um, and I don't know that we, all of us, if we do a great job of like asking for that question.
mm,
Um, we're all really busy, and I mean, maybe that's just what it is. And that's sort of the thing that I'd like to fix with Friends of CC Music is to have like a central place where we're not all doing our own little thing, and like we have like economies of scale. Um, but it's been hard to, and some of this is on me, but it's been hard to like get people to see that vision.
mm.
Um, and I think maybe whether or not we presented it to folks, I think we kind of did that last year. I mean, a bunch of us, um, helped fill out that, get, not only literally fill in the spaces on the spreadsheet, but got other people to go, and I don't know how many people would have found it, you know, without without me. But I
Mhm.
don't think that like some of the Block Sonic folks would have probably gotten involved if I hadn't. I mean, Donnie always does his
Oh yeah.
track, but as far as people actually jumping on the stream, it's hard to know. So I mean, like we're already like doing that, but like then communicating to other people that like we can do this with other projects too. I don't
Yeah.
I don't know
Definitely.
how to do that. Um, sorry, I kind of interrupted your dreaming there, but
Oh no,
so
you're you're on brand for that, Doug.
yeah,
Well, the reality was that's why I started the stream in the first place,
yeah,
right? And that's part of the steps to get to where I want to be. I realized that one of the things that was missing from Netlabel Day when I inherited it was something other than just a bunch of downloads, right? We had a bunch of music that was downloaded, but totally not categorized except by label, which helps no one who doesn't know those labels. And I wanted something where it was, nah, let's get more of a voice into this. And so I started the Net Label Day radio station first because I had to have that. And then I started the Net Label Day 24-hour, well, I mean, it's more than 24, right? But the 24-hour
yeah,
Net Label Day stream that lasts 52 hours. But the premise behind that is that it becomes a community event instead of it just being me answering
yeah,
questions all the time. And that's not because I can't and won't. In fact, I adore that stuff. People send me questions
yeah.
all the time, and
You
God knows
also you also shouldn't when it's 50 hours long.
right,
But
right.
I think you also learned that the first year. So
Well, yeah, but I knew that was going to be the case because it takes a minute before people catch on
yeah,
also. And they have to have faith. And I think that's the thing that's missing from so much of our society right now is we just don't have good faith. And I'm not talking even on the religious
right,
level. I'm talking about just doing really simple oral agreements. Like, hey, if you do this, can I do this? Oh yeah, I would love to. I'd love you to do that, and then not going back on your word,
Yeah.
right? Or if you're going to fill this in, that would be great. Can I take the slot after you? Okay, it's going to be kind of tight, so you got to be there 10 minutes early, no problem. And then showing up 10 minutes early, right? I mean, just simple things like that that make everything flow together, that make communities realize, oh, I'm not wasting my time. Or flip side, I'm not doing everything and nobody else is taking this seriously. Because I think particularly musicians and artists feel that frequently. They feel like they're not being taken seriously by other people that are outside of their little purview, right? Or outside of their clique. But the reality is, of course, we take them seriously. It's just that we don't necessarily have their means of communication. I can open a channel, but you still have to pick up on
Right.
the other end. I can send you the
Yeah.
Morse code, but you got to respond.
And it's like we have a Discord that
Yep.
no one uses. There is a CC Music channel in the official Creative Commons Slack, which no one
Yeah.
uses. The
Yeah.
channels exist.
Yeah. The things are there, and I knew that it was going to take me at least 3 years before I had the tools in place. And so now I'm going on that. Now I'm going on that premise that the tools now are in place. Now we have to start connecting the tools. And the premise behind connecting the tools goes beyond a simple 24-hour broadcast. My functioning thought about Netlabel Day Radio is anybody at any time should be able to jump in and have a show, right? At, and I don't necessarily want to monitor that, and morally speaking, I wouldn't monitor that anyway. At some point, that's up to you guys to figure that stuff out, right? But that's kind of a throwback to my youth when I kept hearing all these really terrible DJs, right? I thought, Christ, I can do better than that. So of course I became a DJ and I proved that I can do better than that. I just happened to be at the wrong radio station at the wrong time. And I was at KCMU right when KUOW had decided that our little tiny 100-watt radio station had just raised $100,000 and they had no idea where it had come from. It's like, well, because we work hard. And so then all of a sudden they started siphoning the money off the top, started hiring paid staff. Totally top-down decision again, and we all walked out.
Mm.
And then it became KEXP, which is what it remains. So it's not that I don't have that experience on air. I do, right? I also know what the deal is. The deal is you have to have management that you can trust, in a sense. And I know that that's where an awful lot of musicians are right now. There are an awful lot of musicians who are really hurt. There are an awful lot of musicians who are mistrusting. There are an awful lot of musicians who don't have any confidence or any faith in anybody else to get their message out. And so they feel like everything is on their shoulders. And if you're one of those musicians listening to this right now, please get that shit off your shoulders and put it onto somebody else's. There are a bunch of people who will share that burden with you because it's not a burden. Honestly, I'm happy to do that stuff. I feel lighter when I get to help somebody carry something with joy. For crying out loud, there's not nearly enough joy in the world. So if we can make people happier by doing what makes us happy, then how is that a problem?
Absolutely.
So the radio station is part of that, and Netlabel Day itself is part of that. I think you all have heard me talk about how I wish we had certain more material because we're awfully EDM heavy, and partly that's because of the nature of independent production, and I understand that. I understand that's the time we're in. I understand that I'm in a country where they've butchered all of the music programs also. So,
Well,
so yes, here we are.
Some of that is the history of digital music too, and
Yes,
Netlabel
exactly.
specifically. I mean, but
Yes. And so there's the other thing that we have to kind of getting back to your phrase. what the hell's a net label? And my opinion on that one doesn't matter, even though, of course, I lead the roost. But if anybody wants it, it's anything you want it to be, as long as you give me music, and I don't care about the details. But the practical part of it, and the historian in me talking about Net Label Day will tell you, well, it arose from a very particular set of circumstances. But of course, that historian will also tell you those circumstances no longer exist. So it's probably time to revisit some of that stuff. I have been talking with Marilyn Roxy and a couple of other folks who are like, well, what do we do as a label anymore? And I think that's an excellent question. I mean, again, the response is always, well, it's whatever you want to do with the label, but that's not the guidance they're looking for. The
Yeah.
guidance they're looking for is a series of protocols. And where I stand on that, if I'm going to be really dictatorial about it, a label has at least one artist whose music they distribute. There's my
Yeah.
fancy net label description. But the real power of a label is the power that we can take away from the old studio system, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're missing. We need an actual label that's a label, right?
Okay.
If I
I
Go ahead.
sorry to interrupt, but I didn't want to get too far away from your net label definition before. So I was processing it, and my immediate thought was I don't like this definition, but I realized that
Mhm.
it's not the one artist that
Right.
is the problem. To me, and whatever we can have different opinions about what this is, but
Mhm.
to me, I think the thing that's missing there is it's not you. If your label is just releasing one artist and it's you, it's not a label, it's a pseudonym. Like like I mean like
But I'm okay with that. I mean,
yeah.
that's Frank Zappa's label had Frank Zappa on it. Todd Rundgren's Bearsville had Todd Rundgren
Well,
on
yeah, and I don't have a problem with people releasing their own stuff, but if it's only you, then come on, what are we doing here? That I mean
it.
that's
Well, that's where I was going with that,
okay.
right? I mean, that's what I'll connect for you. So I'm okay if it's just you. That said, the real strength of a label and the real power of labels is a group identity,
Yeah.
right? Because those of us who have been following quote unquote labels since they were on Deutsche Grammophon, 78s, know that labels tend to indicate something. What they indicate is not just who owns them, they indicate something else. Like if I pick up something on 4AD, I can tell you what it's going to sound like before I even play the album. 4AD has a very particular audio identity. I could say the same thing about Nesu Ertegun's Atlantic Records, right? If I pick up an Atlantic jazz album, I know what that's going to sound like pretty quick. There's going to be a bunch of variation because it has the Modern Jazz Quartet and Big Joe Turner at the same time he has Ornette Coleman, but it's going to sound like Atlantic, and I know it's Atlantic the same way that I would know if it was an Atlantic R&B song as opposed to a Stax Volt, right? To say those label names creates an identity and an audio image, if you will, in somebody else's head about what this is and what this does and what this means and where it comes from. That's the power that we have as net labels, if that's what we want to use. We can say that our label does this, sounds like this, and you know it instantly. That would be nice. And I think the more we encourage people to be more curatorial about their net labelism, right? Their net label choices, and choose projects that are very particularly allied with their vision, and to have a vision behind it rather than, hey, just my buddies, all tossing things together. Well, if it's just your buddies why don't you find the common thread that your
Yeah,
buddy?
and this is not something that I've explored and not
Mhm.
something that we necessarily need to explore, but right now. But I do have this sort of thought about like what is the difference between a collective and a net label. Now, I haven't asked the folks at oh, I'm gonna have to look it up. They are a collective, but I'm blanking on the name. But the good news is that I have the on the net label day or not net label week rather uh, the etherpad that I have their name written on it. So I
Oh,
just have to go look for it because I'm blanking. New Focus Recordings.
oh yeah,
So they are a collective, but
yes.
they're a net label. I mean, at some level.
Exactly. The
So
moment they press something, they're no longer a collective.
I'm gonna ask them to be on the net labelist panel. And you and I, along with presumably Jason and William, will be talking about that tomorrow,
Mhm.
which will be Sunday, March 23rd. Now, most of you will probably hear this after that meeting has taken place. But if you want to join us, I would be ecstatic for people to come and join us. Um, and Omar, by the way, I see that meeting invite. That one did work, so I don't know why the one for today didn't work. But whatever, doesn't matter.
No.
Uh, but yeah, so Jason and William also accepted that. So I invited some other people, but it's probably just going to be us four. That is, I will put the meeting invite in the show notes. So people can just click on that and see the time and they can do like they can let the computer do the time zone calculations and stuff, which is that is particularly weird this time of year, since we have changed to summertime and most of the rest of the world has not. But I will go ahead and say that that is going to be at 2 p.m. Central, which is noon Pacific. Um, and yeah, we will talk a bit about who else is going to be um, who has accepted those panelist discussions and who we hope to have on those discussions. And I think aside from asking you if you have anything you want to close with, that's probably a pretty good place to stop. So, do you have anything that I probably have told this story 1,000 times, but I'm gonna tell it again. Every time like that I think of like asking like, hey, what do you want to tell the people? At the very beginning of, I think they only had one album. There was the band Snot. Are you
Oh yeah.
familiar? And the lead singer he passed away. I think he might have died in a car wreck, but I'm not real sure. But anyway, on the beginning of their album, they say they have like a interview. I think it's a mock interview, but I guess it is say something for the record. Say something to the people. What do you want to tell the people? And he says, like, clearly in like metal speak, fuck the record and fuck the people. That's what I think of every time that I ask somebody, well, what do you have to say to the people? So, uh, yeah. Anyway, what do you have to say to the people?
I'm a little nicer than Snot.
I mean, you can be mean if you're like gonna start like going into like a wailing guitar. I mean, it fits the mood well. So
I can do that,
yeah, But in any case, yeah,
Nah, I'm gonna be polite because I can.
yeah.
Um,
Well, maybe it's not the best thing to say if you're like running a community organization, like so.
right.
Yeah,
Well, I think that's what I would have to say is that I feel very much like there is an awful lot of unfound community, right?
yeah,
And I think that the goal here for me is to find as much community as I can and to make everybody feel like they're a part of this and that this matters, because it does. This is cool stuff, and wow, there's so many things that we all get lost in when we talk about technical matters, but really all this stuff comes back to the same thing, which is, hey, I got something here. You want to listen to this? Yes, of course I would. And as long as we can keep things simple like that, I think the rest of it solves itself. I'm pretty good at putting my ego aside, so I'm going to encourage other people to do that for the greater good. And the more we work together and the more music we share with each other that's supposed to be shared, the more that we create a world where sharing is acceptable and desirable. And I think that matters. I think that matters even more when the rest of the world seems to be closing off. And I think our sharing crosses borders much more quickly than everything else. And if we can keep our sharing good and do what's right with our sharing, I think that we make a much better world, not just better community in a small sense, but a big capital C community. And that's what I want with Netlabel Day.
Well said. Well, thank you, Omar, for being here, and thank everyone for either watching or eventually I'll have the audio version, so listening. This